All right. So good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Global Trade in 2026, Key Signals, Shifts, and Strategies for Success. Thank you all for attending today. My name is Brittany Bennett. I'm a marketing manager at E2Open, and I am delighted to be your host today. During the next 45 minutes or so, you will hear from our global trade experts, Tom Mackey, Asha Wanless, and Andy Simmons, as they discuss regulatory changes that are shaping this year's global trade stage and what they're doing to prepare for it. So before we meet our panelists and we dive into our discussion, a few quick reminders. We encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A feature. We'll also address as many questions as we can at the end of this discussion. And if the session, as a reminder, this session is being recorded and a link will be shared to access it here in about a day or two. All right, now let's introduce our panelists. Asha, could you begin by sharing a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody, you bet. So Asha Wanless, I'm the Director of International Trade and Regulatory Compliance at Olympus. Olympus is a medical device company. We're headquartered in Japan. I've been with the company for 4 years and I sit in the legal department. Prior to Olympus, I have about 20 years of experience leading multinational trade and across various industries, off-road, electronics, filtration. I'm a licensed customs broker. My MBA is in international business, and I'm a Navy veteran. And finally, I'm located in Minneapolis.
Awesome, thank you. And Tom, how about you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Brittany. First, thanks to AAEI and E2Open for hosting this event and inviting me. My name is Tom Mackey. I am the Director of Global Trade for Sophos Companies. We are a global cybersecurity company catering to mostly small and mid-sized enterprises. I am a lawyer since 2007. Previously, I was in the ITAR world at BAE Systems and what used to be called ITT Corp. And I am currently about 30 minutes north of Portland, Maine, completely surrounded by snow.
I can imagine that you're freezing up there. All right, and my fellow E2Opener, Andy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Brittany. Good day, everyone. Thanks to AAEI for sponsoring us today and to my colleagues, Tom and Asha. My name is Andy Simmons. I am in Lake Forest, Illinois. I am the Senior Director of Solutions Consulting for North America at E2Open. I've worked at E2Open and its predecessor company, Amber Road, for 20 years. And before that, at another global trade software company called Vastera, which some of you might remember. So I've worked in global trade for over 30 years. I hold an MBA from Duke University's Fuqua School of Business, and I'm also a CPA, Certified Public Accountant. Thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. And for all of our audience members, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about our speakers, you can do so by clicking on the Resources tab at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's dive on in. So as we all know, 2025 was a whirlwind of changes. Some were more impactful than others. And so, Andy, given your experience working across numerous sectors, I'm interested to hear, what 2025 policy changes caused the most stir and which do you think you'll see bleed into 2026?
Yeah, well, thanks, Brittany. That's really a great question to start out with as we move into the new year. I'd say at the highest level, in 2025, the biggest challenge we faced was that policy changes just kept coming at us from all directions and changing all the time. It was really chaotic and relentless, and I'm not sure that's going to change anytime soon. Everyone expects the global trade people to have the answers. So in addition to being on alert 24/7 for all of these changes and then changes to the changes, we had to be active and offer support proactively throughout our organizations. And I also think it was important that it really became obvious that we had to become aware of multiple sources of information. So in the olden days, like let's say 13 months ago, if a regulation wasn't posted in the Federal Register, at least in the United States, it really wasn't considered the law. But that all changed now, where social media, especially Truth Social, is now an accepted source of legal compliance information in many cases. So at E2Open, for example, when we used to be able to wait until something came out in the Federal Register to publish content updates, Now we have to consider other sources as well based on our client demand as well as legal advice. So all that churned up last year and it's flowing directly into this year. I really don't see anything changing in terms of that. And I think that we're going to see even more changes, right? We were all sort of thrown off base by the multi-layered tariffs, by scrutiny on origin information, impacts on free trade agreements, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot, and it's continuing.
Thank you, Andy. And, given how many different places that we are seeing these changes show up, Asha, I'm curious to hear from you. How are you staying on top of all of these changes and how are you preparing for them?
Yeah, I think Andy hit on, the dilemma that we have as trade professionals. Who knew that Truth Social would be in my portfolio of input into new regulations, as well as news articles. I mean, it really is interesting that I actually find value in reading some of the news articles on these topics because it gives a business view. LinkedIn is a really interesting avenue as well. I really enjoy seeing the perspectives of some of the other leaders in trade and how they're thinking about these regulations. Email blasts from various attorneys. I've kind of selected a few, some brokers, attorneys, freight forwarders, because they really provide this, real-time information and in actionable words. But I tell you what, reading those proclamations and actions yourself are the number one source. Obviously, as Andy pointed out, sometimes that takes time to get there. But what I found that I really didn't do in the past is I really read these for myself and understand the detail, because all those other sources I just mentioned sometimes don't get the details quite right, or news articles misunderstand a concept that is trade related. So as painful as it is, if you're not reading these presidential announcements, these White House announcements, the proclamations and actions yourself, you need to. But then you also need help deciphering them and just determining, okay, which is an actual change, what is an upcoming change, and what's just a threat that I don't need to worry about. Did I send out an email to everybody saying that there's going to be tariffs on everybody because of Greenland? I didn't. That was a call I made. Now, some companies would want you to. Hey, you better tell us everything all the time. That's your company culture. But I think that's part of the challenge is you're really needing to figure out, when do I need to share information and when do I wait? And then really understanding the details is even harder. And that's where leaning on trusted partners is really critical. To the extent that folks have access to attorneys and consultants. I mean, I have, Bromiller, our attorneys on speed dial along with Daily on Trade. If you don't have access, though, to attorneys, trade groups are a wonderful avenue to gather information like AAEI. So everyone here, I think, is part of AEI. If you're not, you should join. It's a fabulous group to be able to share what are you all doing? How are we thinking about this? And join subcommittees. We really have to lean into those resources that we really haven't before. And if you're not part of a trade group and you just join this and your company can't afford it, this is the time to continue to lean on our resources and our networks. And then to prepare, if your company teams aren't already educated, finance, procurement, engineering, on the basics, like what's an HTS code, what's duty, it makes the speed of these new regulations really hard to explain internally. So education is key. I did multiple town halls this last year, one-on-one meetings with departments. And then you need to prep your data, have it ready, have it refreshed periodically, work with finance so that you're pulling in your import data. They have access to forecast, that you've got that data ready. And then I want to mention the BIS affiliates role. This is actually one that we can prepare for. We know it's probably coming in November. Get ahead of this. If you don't already have discussions started with your whoever you're using for restricted party screening, you need to get this BIS affiliates role under control. So that's when we can actually literally prepare for. And then finally, create those communication channels. So for all these different changes or these new rules coming, you know who to go to and when, and you're not figuring that out on the fly, and that it can be repeatable.
Excellent. Thank you. And so, Tom, I'm curious to hear from you as well to understand, how are you seeing these policy changes impact your operations or your internal teams and hear what helped y'all?
Certainly. There has been a lot of impact internally. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I spend more time acting more like a real lawyer than managing a trade team right now. I'm spending, as Aisha said, lots of time reviewing proclamations, executive orders, reviewing the news to see what might turn into actual regulations. When it comes to the reciprocal tariffs, we're looking at constant changes on secondary classifications based on when when a Trump threat became policy or when it was just a threat and the policy was negated, all kinds of situations like that. Something I never thought I would do personally is I'm following a multitude of cases, right? The IEEPA tariff cases that started at the Court of International Trade. I know I can speak for my team. We are impatiently waiting for the Supreme Court decision on the appeals that started with that case. We're looking at new warehousing. Our distribution model has every product that we bring in for the whole Western Hemisphere comes into the United States. So we're now looking at ways to warehouse elsewhere to help mitigate these tariffs on the off chance that the IEEPA tariffs are deemed legal. So as much as we're trying to be concrete, I mean, the ground is constantly shifting under our feet. And to Aisha's point with Greenland, we took a similar tack and we really just waited a few more days before we started doing any prep work to see where this was going to go. What has helped for me, and I hope it helps for a lot of people, is constant communication with your cross-functional colleagues. I've been really since last April, I've been in constant contact with our supply chain personnel who deal with the Americas, our finance people, even our product engineering teams to see what we can do to mitigate this because it's a sudden change and it could really impact the bottom line.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned having consistent communication is absolutely crucial, which, completely understand a lot is at stake when it comes to compliance. And so I'm curious to hear, Tom, also what is your strategy for managing those risks?
First and foremost, to go back to the cross-functional support, you need full buy-in. You need to be out in front. You need to be talking to people within your organization to make sure everyone's on the same page. The next step that we always look at are very clear and concise SOPs. We are constantly writing and rewriting and then broadcasting and discussing to make sure that everyone knows what their roles are with different types of transactions. If you don't have that, you're at risk of having a lot of people running in different directions and you don't really have the insight into what's going on. So I cannot stress enough clear communication, whether it's that direct communication with your colleagues or at least on written down SOPs that you're constantly looking to improve on. And the last thing, and I will fess up here that Sophos are an E2 Open client, so I'll try and keep this to the truth and not make it sound like an advertisement, but automate. As much as you can automate your sales processes, your order processes, so that those orders that are clearly safe to go without extra enhanced scrutiny can go, and then you're really able to drill down and focus on really those needles that are in the haystack. And there are a lot of great tools. I will not advocate for one here to avoid bias, but our use of E2 Open has really allowed us to drill down and focus in on orders where our filtering processes show us where the risk is. But with that, I'll just throw this in. We're always auditing internally, externally as well. We want to make sure that we understand that the automation is great, but it only works as well as the inputs that you give it to filter your accounts, your orders, your sales, your shipments.
Yeah, fantastic. And Asha, do you have anything that you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, I would say that very similar comment with regard to that procedure development, audit, and monitoring. So having that rigorous cycle is absolutely critical. And then the other aspect of once you audit, that you're getting what you expect to get, the right answer, that they're accurate, and you're monitoring that processes are being followed, you're able to put a score to that and really quantify the risk. That allows you to prioritize. Because I've never heard of a trade compliance organization that says, we are right sized. We don't need any more resources. So the reality is that our task is to help the organization make decisions, our leaders make decisions about where resources should be placed and when do we add resources versus take on risk. And the only way to have that conversation really is to be able to kind of put numbers to the issues that we're seeing, to be able to prioritize and communicate up what those risks are. So I think that's a key approach to risk management, is putting a number to it and then working with leaders on prioritization and that risk trade-off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And, Andy, are you seeing anything else from other companies on how they're managing risk that you'd like to add as well?
Well, I'd say the number one thing that I see is exactly what Tom talked about, was the standard operating procedures, what we used to call desk procedures in my olden days, becoming increasingly important. And there's also the situation where companies are running a lot of what if scenarios to manage risk. So what if a tariff changes? What if a regulation changes? How might that impact my sourcing or my sales? So that you can pivot very quickly if those things truly happen. So I would say that's a couple of things that I'm seeing across organizations, in addition to everything that Asha and Tom talked about.
Excellent. Thank you. And so, we've seen an increase in policy and enforcement expectations as well. And so from a practitioner's perspective, where are you seeing enforcement tighten the most, Tom?
So on the export side, thankfully for our company, we haven't seen any direct impact, but for anyone who signs up for like Bartlett's daily brief, you're seeing all the horror stories from whether it's enhanced enforcement coming out of OFAC, BIS, DOJ, CBP. You're seeing more and more posts coming out of OFAC. I've been seeing probably one every 2 weeks, where there's been a new a settlement between OFAC and an offending party for some type of sanctions violations. And while I haven't done an exact count, it definitely feels like there are more of those settlements coming out more often right now. On the import side, I have a quick story that could be a bit of a cautionary tale. Our primary tariff code into the United States that we've literally used without any questions for the last 10 years, since the inception of a lot of our hardware products. CBP told us in late October through a CF-29 notice of action that that classification was incorrect. I will point out that classification happened to be one of those listed as an exception to the IEEPA tariffs. So we thought we were sitting quite well from spring through summer and most of the fall. And then we got this notice. We've challenged it. We have protested it with the agent. Actually, let me back up. This happened because we submitted a post-summary correction on a shipment. We had to clean up a secondary classification, so we were doing the right thing because we caught that it was inaccurate because of, again, the shifting that I mentioned earlier. So we did our post-summary correction, and then we got our notice of action. We're still in the middle of protesting it, but as a word of advice, if you're not 1,000%, sorry for the exaggeration, 1,000% certain of your classifications on your U.S. imports, you need to take a look at them as soon as you can. And if you need to, as Asha pointed out, bring in outside counsel, have them look at it, have them comment, and make sure that you're very, very comfortable with where you're at with your products. Because ours was changed from inside the exemption to outside. So on top of the notice, they also sent us a bill for a retrospective bill for $500,000. And then we've had to change the classification while we protest it. So we're currently paying an extra 23% duty per shipment that we had not been planning to pay. So yes, the emojis were our reaction at the time as well. But yeah, so it's definitely enforcement is across the board. On the export side, obviously, if you're dealing with China, you need to be very careful because I think most agencies are keying up for that. And then on the import side, I'm sure there have been many media reports where the administration is looking for as much tariff revenue as they can to offset the one big beautiful bill cuts that were incorporated over the fall. So that's where I'm seeing enforcement.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing those examples. And Asha, how about for you?
And not top that. That was terrifying and amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, your time may still come. Be careful.
It is definitely a call to action, though. While not a personal story, another area that I understand that customs is focused on is origin and doing origin verifications, obviously for a number of reasons between, varying IEEPA tariffs or 232 tariffs based on country. So I think that's another area for folks to really be doubling down on of, are you positive your HTS are correct? Number one, do you have any concerns with your country of origin? Because now would be the time to start looking at those before customs does and address any issues that you might have. And that goes toward also transformation. Do you have any concerns that transformation really is occurring in kind of these higher risk countries that might have inputs, say heavy input from China, but it's being manufactured in another country? Really focus on those areas of high risk, because customs is looking, and we are all hearing, I think, these horror stories between the 28s and 29s, customs really strong enforcement posture. And then also we've all heard about the DOJ and DHS task force. They're focused hopefully more on really, bad actors. And I'm sure that's none of us. But the point is the administration is obviously tightening. And then the last thing I'll say is really interesting to see, some of these new regulations come out to say that customs should ignore, like on the 232 for metals, ignore any mitigation and prosecute, or the fullest extent of the law, the importer should have to pay no mitigating factors. That is really new, and I don't know if it's legally grounded, but it is the administration's focus and what we all need to be aware of.
Wow. I mean, that's certainly enough to keep, you and your teams busy. And so, I got to know, on a personal note, how are you managing your sanity through all of these changes and, all of, the things that are getting thrown at you guys right now? Asha?
Sure. So I know so there's kind of two parts. There's the work part and the personal part. And part of the question, I think, is you want to know from a real personal perspective. But I'll start with the work part. I personally am very fortunate to have supportive bosses. I have two bosses, one in my region, one global. They're both amazing. I have good relationships across the company with the trade compliance team that's in supply chain here in our region. They're just fabulous to work with. Other supply chain partners, procurement, engineering, very fortunate to have those relationships, because in a time of stress and uncertainty, it is extra stressful when you don't have that. So to the extent that, and even if you just don't know who is in those roles, if you're able to start making some conscious efforts to build networks with those key functions, the finance, the procurement, the engineering, do that, because that really, and it doesn't have to be personal, but at least relationship building and knowing who to talk to really helps through these challenging times. I've leaned into trade groups like AAEI for support. It is amazing that just that feeling of we're all going through this together, and you start to get this sense of like, this is kind of cool. We're in the trenches together. We're learning from each other. We're using muscles we haven't used before. Like I said, I've never had to read regulations like this. And I honestly haven't logged into ACE in years and years, but I'm going to be taking a detailed ACE training coming up next week. So I'm really excited to look at this as an opportunity, even though it sucks. And then on a personal note, I stopped drinking a year ago. So that was really healthy for me and has given me a lot of clarity and energy. I focused on really clean eating this last year. I'm vegetarian now, and then far more physically active. So really working out and focused on kind of more health and wellness. And then finally, I started a gratitude journal. There's just a lot of science that says if we really, refocus our brain on being grateful, it actually kind of helps our view of things. So that's another recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. Healthy body, healthy mind, everything works out better. For sure. And Tom, I think I see your stress reliever right there.
So contrary to my boss, who I believe is actually on this webinar, this is my immediate supervisor, but she is always here. And, when all of the everything's hitting the fan, I can look down at her and, it gives you a little bit of respite and reflection. Yes, you are that good. This is cricket, everyone, just to let you know. But I mean, and to Asha's point as well. There you go. Sorry, everyone. She's got to go. I too, I've been dry for at least a month, so Asha's got me beat by 11. But yeah, the healthier you can be, the better. Also, to her points, we have a great network here at Sophos. We all know each other well because we've been around each other for probably about 5 years. So most of the meetings on these topics on the import side of late have really started with more or less a bit of a vent session, just kind of get it all out, and then you're able to really focus in on trying to find a solution that works. I think the big thing for me is what I like to call compartmentalizing, right? Once the workday is done, as best as you can, get away from it. Go to your hobbies, whether, I mean, for Asha's point, exercise, gratitude journal. I am looking forward to heading down the road from my house here in a couple hours and hitting the cross-country ski trails for about an hour just to get outdoors. And it is almost to freezing here up in Maine. But yeah, when the workday is done, whatever you can do to disconnect and really mentally, spiritually, and physically just recharge so that you can head back to the trenches the next day.
Yeah, for sure. And Andy, do you have anything that you want to add on top of that?
Sure. Well, similar to what Asha and Tom said, I'm really lucky with my work colleagues. Many of us have been working together 20 or 30 years. So I don't really have any interpersonal stress at work. I mean, there's the work stress, but it's not, personal. So that I'm grateful for that. On a personal side, I've started scheduling breaks on my calendar when I'm out of the office, even if I'm not. And maybe take some time. I love listening to classical music, or just do something completely non-work related, like cleaning my office. I try to take daily walks alone or with my dogs. I go to the gym regularly, try to eat healthy. But unlike Tom or Asha, I'd say on more than one occasion, perhaps I've been driven to start happy hour a little earlier in the day than would normally occur in more calm times. So I guess to each his own, as they say, but that's what I do.
No judgment here, Andy. Andy,
Yeah.
if I knew it was classical music instead of the corgi in my lap, I would have brought my tuba down and had that for you.
And I can wheel on the piano. We could have a little duo here, then, right?
Who knows? Maybe if we have time at the end, you can bust it out. All right. So I really appreciate y'all sharing that with us. And, Andy, I'm going to turn it back over to you. So I'm really interested to hear, across all the markets, that you've been speaking with, where are you seeing companies really start to kind of stumble with some of these shifts? And, what systems are they trying to put in place in order to solve them?
Sure, great question. As you can imagine, we see companies in all industries, but there are definitely some similarities. And I think the biggest stumbles that people talk to me about are what we've learned to call the unknown unknowns, right? So for example, we all knew that tariffs are shifting. Not that that's easy, but we could role play the impacts that might have. But I'm really not sure that anyone saw China's broad extraterritorial rules coming into force so quickly and then being, I'll say, suspended, or whatever term they use to save face, the affiliates rule coming and going. It's all these things that you just can't anticipate. So the biggest stumbles, I think, were dealing with the unknown unknowns, the things that come from left field without warning, and then the rug literally gets pulled out from under you when it changes again. I think all this sort of, if you look at the funnel, it all comes down to really spending valuable time on things that you really didn't anticipate that you were going to. So your time gets sucked up trying to make sense of things, if that's even possible, to help your colleagues. The same things that Asha and Tom talked about, working with your colleagues. All this stuff is really, really important, but it really, really takes a lot of time. There are only so many hours in the day. So I really see that people are talking about time management as being a big stumble. And I think the systems being put into place to help this are, of course, your classical, global trade management systems. But really, I think the word system can be used to talk about a broader thing. The processes you're using, closer communications with your brokers, as Asha talked about, and your customs authorities, and even personal systems, right? To manage your time, as we've all talked about already, to read the regulations, to think about what's going on, and to work with other parts of your organization. So I think the word systems really is broader than just, technology systems, but it's really the whole way you manage your work life to kind of, not stumble or stumble as little as you can with all the craziness that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. And, speaking about, talking with your colleagues and, your operations as a whole, I'm curious to hear, how these regulatory changes are starting to impact relationships with your suppliers. Asha, can you speak to that?
Yeah, you bet. Obviously, regulation changes lead to new or different requirements than we've had in the past. And it can be challenging. In some instances, suppliers may push back or not even believe that what we're saying could possibly be true. I mean, why would you pay 200% for an imported product just because you don't know where the aluminum came from? That doesn't make any sense. So there's this sense of disbelief. I'd say other suppliers are really trying, or they might be larger and have a U.S. presence and understand. But even then, they might struggle with their upstream suppliers. And information that we might now be asking for, it's just never been needed before. So they don't have it tracked or understood. So what we're trying to do is obviously educate suppliers to the best of our ability, influence them. But this is an area I think we're all trying to figure out. A couple avenues that might be helpful is sharing with suppliers information that's not just from your company. A good example, COAC just came out with their 8 recommendations to CBP. And right in there, you can see that, COAC is saying these are our recommendations. So to be able to share that, if one of those points is a contention point with the supplier that they don't really believe this is real, we could say, yeah, even COAC is pushing customs on this, or working with AAEI, who has just a wonderful, library of information that can be leveraged to share with suppliers. And then I think that translates into contracts. So there's an opportunity to work with suppliers to the extent you're able, or at least work with your legal team to provide recommendations of a few key points. One is tariff sharing. Perhaps all of you have already thought of this, but there are different ways you could do this, where if you're the importer into the US, then a certain percentage obviously gets charged back to the supplier. It could be a certain threshold instead of the entire thing if it goes beyond a certain amount. But a piece to keep in mind is for your domestic, if you have a supplier that is the importer into the US and you buy domestically, but they're increasing their cost to you for them to cover their tariff charges, might want to think about talking with them about a duty refund sharing agreement. So if IEEPA turns out not to be legal and we get money back, fingers crossed, they're going to get all that money back. Are you going to get part of it? Because if you were tariff sharing with them, you should get some of that too. Free trade expectations is another bucket that I'm seeing more in contracts. So in our industry, medical devices are duty free. We really haven't had to think about free trade before. Well, now we're starting to say, oh gosh, if we're going into an agreement with, say, a new supplier in Canada, maybe we want to start talking about free trade and how do we build that into a contract? And then the last contract component is often contracts have some general language about providing necessary information. I think now more than ever, though, we can add in more details to say necessary information such as the value of your content, such as the origin of your melt and pour, etc. Because that at least gives some leverage for some of these regulations that have changed the conversation with suppliers.
Excellent. And Tom, would you like to build on top of that?
In some ways, I certainly can. I think for us on the broker side, because again, with that number of changes with regards to either our primary classifications or more frequently the secondary classifications, we've been with our broker for what for me feels like often. We've been in contact. They've had a lot of questions on some of these items. To Asha's point, we've even dealt with the steel and aluminum on even in our firewalls. It's like that much content, but it was worth the legwork to get to that number versus having a total invoice charged with that extra 50 or 25 to 50%, depending on when that particular import came in. For us on the supplier side, it hasn't been too bad. We were able to reach out to all of our key suppliers, mostly in Taiwan, and update them on all the tariff situation, and they for now they've rolled with it pretty smoothly. So not nearly the headache, but today's Thursday and tomorrow's Friday, and who knows what will happen. But it's been good for us, and I highly recommend that make sure that you have good relationships with your suppliers. Be in contact with them, as Asha was pointing out. I think the name of the game right now is making sure that you're talking to whoever you need to as soon as you can. As soon as you're seeing that news come up, if you feel like you need to prep for it, reach out to them and make sure that they're aware and that they're as close to the same page as you on next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. You can never over communicate, right?
Not these days, no.
And so, Andy, I'm curious to hear from you too. Do you see a role of technology here? And, if so, where are clients or regulators even demanding more capabilities, better reporting, things like that?
Well, as you know, technology is my business, right? So, of course, I'm going to mention global trade systems as a key technology, but really it's more than that. It's really understanding and having a tighter relationship with the other systems in your company. So those are technology systems that sourcing uses, how these systems talk to each other, your order entry systems, and really, as everyone else has talked about, the systems that you use to get this valuable information from your suppliers. I think all technology can be used for all of that, and it's really, really very important. Also, as other people have mentioned, restricted party screening systems for the probably upcoming affiliates rule. All these systems are really, really important. Integration with accounting systems. We see more scrutiny over first sale and other issues that affect entered value. So I think understanding the systems that come into play and the technology that's used to create entered value is crucial these days, because now it's really more important than ever with these multiple tariffs that even a single product might have cumulative tariffs. And if you have an error in entered value, those things could snowball. So understanding all these systems and technology and how they work, it's not someone else's problem now, it becomes our problem. Regarding reporting, I'll just get on my soapbox for a minute and say that one of my biggest frustrations in software sales and consulting for over 30 years has been that no matter how many reports my system has and all the runtime parameters that you can use to select the data you want, it never fails that the clients want a report you don't have, right? And in those cases, you have to put together a statement of work. It takes time to build it. People want changes. It's really a very sometimes long, drawn out, complicated, and very, very painful and frustrating process. So I think where we're moving in terms of reporting, and most software companies are moving now, is they're shifting. And we're saying, here now, we're going to give you your data. And then we say to the clients, now that you have all this data, you can write whatever reports you want using whatever business intelligence, BI tools, or reporting systems you have throughout your company. So to all the product managers who have decided to go this way, to get out of the report creation business and to get into the data delivery business, I say, good for you. Good for product management for doing that. Personally, it makes my job much easier, and I think it's a huge benefit for our customers. So to paraphrase the old adage, we're not giving people a fish anymore, we're teaching them how to fish. So I think the whole world of reporting now is going to grow to be increasingly important, but it's going to be important for the specific companies and their requirements, and not what we as software vendors think they should be reporting on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, speaking of critical reports and metrics, I'm curious to hear, Tom, what are the most important reports that you're using, and what do you wish that you could have?
For us on the export side, it's licensing reports out of all the jurisdictions that we ship out of, which for us is the US, EU, UK, India, Taiwan. And for those, it's vitally important that we have all that cross-border activity in reports so that we can audit against it to make sure, as I discussed earlier, that the systems are working the way that they were implemented, which they usually do. And then also it's working to the way that we have set up our filters to make sure that licenses are auto-applying to those sales. So they're showing up on commercial invoices. And then most importantly, for the regulatory piece, they're showing up on export declarations out of whichever jurisdiction. And then to follow that on, as probably one or two of my employees would tell you, is those reports become vital for all of the submissions that we make to BIS semi-annually, and then for us as well, the Export Control Joint Unit out of the British government as well. On the import side, unlike Asha, I have been in ACE every other week or every day, depending on when things started turning south. So we're constantly pulling our import data down so that we have a cumulative sheet of all of the imports where we are hoping to claim an IEPA refund sometime in the near future. Those are key ones for me. Asha?
Yeah, we don't have a global trade system. So we have Access, this really cool tool, and this other one you might have heard of, Excel. Wow. So those are great. But the trade compliance team and the supply chain monitoring team really rely heavily on ACE and broker data for the same reasons. And it's, it's messy, it's hard, it's taking this data and having to refresh it, and if it's updated, and how do you put it together? And so it's not pretty, but it's what we have. And on the import side, and then the export side, obviously, the most critical system issues is for sure the restricted party screening, and then using ACE data to audit against as well on the export side.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so for a little bit of fun, let's do just a quick role play. A major change has just been posted. How do you handle the first 48 hours after it occurs? Asha?
Yeah, 48 hours, we're done. Everything's all wrapped up, because if you've gone 48 hours and haven't done anything, you're behind. But I think it's the basics. It's, what's the information, pulling it together, communicating to the right people. It's telling one group, a larger group, maybe the broader impact, a smaller group, maybe more about actions. Andy mentioned rare earth minerals. That was a great example. When that came out, we let the larger leadership group know this is happening. We're on top of it. And a smaller group was asked to help. Hey, sourcing and engineering, do we have these in our product? Because we might have some challenges. So, I think it's that communication. It's figuring out, okay, we may not know all the information. Do we default to claiming or disclaiming? Hopefully, and this is a real takeaway or action for those listening, it's really important that you know your business and know your product. And if you don't, take some time and spend time with product managers, look at your information. When the 232 semiconductor just came out this last week, the question was, do we have these type of semiconductors in our products? And our team was really quickly able to say, no, we don't. So that, was a quick win for us versus if we had literally no idea, well, what do? Do you start saying yes to everything that's in chapter 84? So those are the decisions that, obviously you have to make depending on how well you know the product.
Absolutely. And Tom, how about for you?
Well, since Asha opened up with a joke, I'll do the same. We first start with a happy hour with the whole team, and we just go from there. No, in all honesty, sorry, Andy, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus like that. For us, I mean, the key thing is notice first. It's making sure that, like in our case, we're up on the news. So, like I said, Bartlett. I usually have a window open with my Google News feed, constantly refreshing, especially really since April of this year. And then it's digging in. At least for me, I'll start by doing research. If it starts with just the review of the executive order or the proclamation, start there. If I'm not comfortable with it based on experience with this, I'm going to secondary sources similar to what Asha pointed out earlier, whether it's somewhere out on the web, whether it's colleagues, whether it's trade groups, wherever I need to go to make sure that I'm comfortable with what is happening. After that, it's really scope and impacts and which parts of the business will be impacted. Again, to Asha's point, when the 232 investigation results finally came out, I was immediately reaching out to our product people to make sure that processors within our hardware packages don't meet the requirements of the tariff, and we were fortunate to avoid that particular situation. But after those initial steps, it really drills down to huddling with everyone who needs to know, whether it's Zoom meetings, team group chats, whatever needs to happen based on the urgency of the particular situation, right? If it's already an EO, it's already out the door, and there is an effective date that is either coming up or has already hit. So again, to mimic Asha's point here, those first 48 hours are really key these days. And if you're into hours 96 and beyond, you might already be behind the 8 ball. Yeah, and then after that, it's assigning tasks, making sure that everyone who needs to take an action understands clearly what that action is, summarizing your meetings. Again, I think a common theme that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes has really been communication. Keep communicating, providing accurate details until your audience is basically crying uncle.
Pretty much. So we do have a couple questions left over here that we're going to talk about, but real quick, I just want to let everybody know I'm so sorry, but we did just realize that the Q&A feature has not been turned on. However, there will be a survey following the webinar where you'll be able to add all your questions, and we'll be able to follow up with you individually on that. So I do apologize for that confusion. All righty. And so moving on, for our leaders who are looking to enhance their compliance programs, what are some of the key recommendations that you would give them to enhance compliance while also maintaining their agility. Andy, you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I see this all the time. I would say my number one recommendation is hire the best people possible. Compliance is now a company-wide concern, not just a GTM silo. And we all know that every successful team, whether it's hockey or global trade, needs a captain, a Scott Hunter for any heated rivalry fans out there, a seasoned, experienced leader who affects the overall performance that people look up to. So you need the best and the brightest heading up your global trade management department and working in that department. And I think everything flows down from there.
Excellent. And Tom or Asha, do y'all have anything that you would like to build on that?
Well, I mean, I'll throw in first and foremost for Andy that, the best captain was Zdeno Chara of the Boston Bruins, but we'll
Or
leave it
Ilya
at that.
Rozanov of the Boston, whatever they call it in heated rivalry, right?
I think the key is being able to, again, target those transactions or those parties that you really need to drill down and focus on, and having, having a compliance tool, again, such as E2Open, allows you those opportunities to, again, look at where you really need to focus your attention and be able to analyze those more challenging transactions. And then again, audit. You make sure those tools are working so that you can maintain that agility and that flexibility, but also be assured that the tools are working the way you need them to. My team looks at different aspects of the data inputs and filters that we put into our version of the E2Open product. We look at that. For some aspects, we look at it quarterly. Others, we look at it annually.
I'll just add on. I totally agree with what was previously said, but my number one is I strongly recommend that companies perform a full compliance review, and ideally using a third party. So if I were to make a recommendation to a leader, I would say start with a full review, because you don't know what you're dealing with until you do. And using a third party provides that kind of separate look. I'm a huge fan of Daily on Trade. They come in from an import side, they're previous customs auditors, so they know what customs is looking for, and that's what you want to focus on. You want to know what customs is looking for and perform the same risk assessment customs is going to look at, which includes both processes and transactions. From there, you can get a good picture of where are your risks, where are your priorities, and then you can hire the right people and make sure that the department's in the right area within your company to be the most successful.
Oh, thank you for that. So, I mean, we observed so many positive and negatives from 2025. And so I am curious, what would you say were your key lessons from last year that you learned? And, how do they influence your focus going into 2026? Asha, would you like to continue on that?
Sure. So what really worked is, and I hit on this before, is having really outstanding leadership support. Also, being credible as a trusted partner coming into the year helped in that I was able to more quickly make those connections and kind of have a seat at the table to talk about these new regulations. We were able to build on controls that were already in place. We were very fortunate that we had spent just a tremendous amount of effort really working on that control environment. So as chaotic as this last year was, we already had some foundation. Lessons learned, data management is really, really hard to begin with. And then when you add on regulatory complexity and confusion, it's even harder. And without a trade system, that is an area obviously that can trip up a company and was a challenge. Another lesson learned is in this environment, there's new work that's happening, which creates white space. So there's some confusion on who does what. So that was interesting to be in that type of environment. So bringing that to 2026, I already mentioned this, 2026 is a plan ahead for the BIS affiliates rule. That one, everyone should have on their list for this year if you do business outside of the US. And lean into that crisp communication, lean into the network building, both in your company and in trade groups, so that we can really learn from each other and support each other. as we, who knows what's coming this next year. Focusing on that data management component. And then lastly, making sure we're maintaining those controls despite all the chaos that is coming our way.
Well, thank you. And Tom, how about for you?
I'll echo some of what Asha's been saying. I think on the positive side, I have a newer appreciation for how well a lot of our cross-functional colleagues work with us on these really urgent, time-sensitive surprise issues. It's been really reassuring that same here as with Olympus, that we have that credibility, that people know when we need their assistance, to make sure that we are assisting the company in any way that we can. I've said it before, I'll say it again, communication, that is the absolute key. Whoever needs to know, you need to make sure that they know, whether you're doing that by yourself or making sure that it's moving up channels, depending on which part of the organization needs to hear it. Just when I step back, one of the neat things for me is being in this industry. I'm hoping a lot of people also feel the same. Is this is the first time that we've had an opportunity to see our topic area move through the court system all the way up to the Supreme Court. Again, I am a lawyer. I apologize for that, but it is interesting that for the first time, really since 2009, this is one of the keys to the export compliance world. The IEEPA regulation is, it's before the justices. It's been argued. It's really neat, even in the context that we're in, where this is, it's a potentially expensive ruling, but just to be in the middle of it and absorbing that is, in some ways, it's really neat as I geek out on that for a minute.
Of course it is, yeah. All right, Andy, do you have anything that you would like to add on to that?
Sure. I would just like to say that in the 30 years I've been doing this, I thought I'd seen it all, but I was really wrong. If I had to say one thing to 2025 as a year, it would be, so you're kind of wild. And I think it would be more the same for the foreseeable future. So everything everyone has said about paying attention to the news, newspapers, articles, whatever it takes to become the best you can be in terms of education about what's going on, and using your experience and skills to help the rest of your company navigate through it. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Agreed. Thank you guys so much for all of your input and your answers. Y'all were absolutely fantastic. And for our audience, before we finish up, please note that this webinar has been approved for credit. The verification code to receive credit for attending this event will be sent via email here pretty shortly. If you want to learn more about upcoming AAEI programs and events, please visit their website or their resources tab. We hope that you join us again for future webinars and plan to attend AAEI's 105th Annual Conference and Trade Day in June. To register, click on the Resources tab at the bottom of your screen. Thank you again to our wonderful panelists and for sharing your expertise today. We at E2Open are proud to support AAEI and delivering timely, relevant programming like this. And last but not least, thank you all for joining us. We will be sending out a brief survey following this. If you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to fill that out, sharing any additional questions that you may have, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.